I often start with like create a superhero for your community, right? So when I'm working in spaces like this, I say create a superhero for your community. What would that look like? But let's get deeper. What's their superhero name? What's their powers? Where do they live? How do they work on a day-to-day basis, right? What are they doing for, how do they make money? Because a lot of the same time, that's how most comic books start. Think about Spider-Man, starts with Peter Parker, right? He's this, kid from Queens, and he's sitting there, and what does he do? He works for the Daily Bugle as a stringer photographer. He's a student when it starts, and so doing classwork and then, taking pictures and all the rest of that. So that's kind of, you're building out a character out of that. In 2012, I embarked on this great journey to be able to make native comics and really to be able to make a native comic book based pop culture company. Our goal when we founded the company was to create comic books, graphic novels, games, toys, and collectibles. All the things that we don't have growing up, right? Because we're really saturated with American pop culture, which really focuses its attention on the West. And when I talk about this, I talk about it's a Western pop culture bias where natives really only exist along the Rocky Mountain belt, right? At least in American pop culture. Now we know that's not true because we're here. There's lots of natives on the East Coast and down south and the West Coast and up. No, we got native folks are everywhere. Indigenous folks are everywhere. But in Americana, if you will, there is this understanding that native identity really exists within this late 1800s Western framework. And so you have a lot of the nomadic tribes, very much highly represented, Apache, Lakota, Dakota, you have, the Plains tribes, right? Because they fit this ideology around what native people were supposed to look like. Now, the more, settled groups like mine, the Pueblos, and our Navajo relations as sheep herders and farmers as we were out there sort of completed the whole sort of American mythology around the West. Now, a lot of this Western mythology comes from, pop culture. It comes from a romanticized understanding of American history and a romanticized conception and misrepresentation of the American identity. Now, a lot of this Western mythology comes from, pop culture. It comes from a romanticized understanding of American history and a romanticized conception and misrepresentation of the American identity. Because a lot of people, as they were traveling west, this great, vast, open landscape was populated with indigenous peoples, our clan, our relation, our kin, and it made for really spectacular backdrops, right? So it's cultural tourism. And it looked really, really neat because we already seen all the trees. So we don't want natives in trees anymore. We want natives on these broad vistas and these great plains and these expanses where they're riding horses and, doing all this stuff. Natives on these broad vistas and these great plains and these expanses where they're riding horses and, doing all this stuff. Now, my people are not horseback people. My people are low to the ground. I am a giant among Pueblos. We are very short people. As my dad used to say, my dad was a native scholar and educator, but he used to say, he's like, yep, we're round and brown. That's what we are, right? And low to the ground. And I was like, that's great. That's a great way to describe Pueblo peoples. So for me, coming from that perspective is really getting involved in comics and the work that I do in terms of writing, managing this company and promoting pop culture and promoting literacy through pop culture really has to do with is what I wanted to see. And I've heard this a lot from a lot of creators of color. And I've heard this a lot from a lot of creators of color that they didn't have representation in pop culture media in a way that was meaningful, right? And where we see that really, so with our our African American relations, we really saw that develop when Black Panther came out. Right? When Black Panther came out, it was this whole new concept, this whole new identity that they were able to take on, being like, see, this is what we want. We have a superhero, is amazing, is doing amazing things, technologically savvy and superior in many ways to the people around them. There's a great mythology that goes with it that is just a created mythology, but that ties in with African history. You have Killmonger in the story that ties into Black American history as well, and the intersections of the two of those fighting in this story that goes with that. And a lot of the comments that happened after that was, as all of my Native friends were watching it online, they're like, and a lot of the comments that happened after that was, as all of my Native friends were watching it online, they're like, man, where's our Native Wakanda? And I was like, yeah, exactly. This is what we need to create. These are the stories that we need to be telling, is where is the Native Wakandas? Where are these stories that don't embed us in these representations, misrepresentations, and perceptions of Native identity that exist in the Rocky Mountain region? Where are all of those stories that tell about our past, our present, and our future?
So every pencil mark that you make, you want to make sure that you slightly erase it. And then bring out your pen again. You don't want to go off, with your chin, don't go all the way back, because you guys might want to do a neck. And then we're going to do the eye. The eye. Wabam, wabam, and wabam. Okay, so now we're going to do the ear. We're going to start from the bottom of the stairs, and then for those who don't have hats on, we're going to start with the top. Start with the top of the stairs. Go down. Second set of stairs, and down to your final step.
I just remember like using a specific practice used by Marvel comic book writers, and then using that to basically plot out the entire script. And then as we built the story up and all the character traits and all that stuff, the dialogue sort of started falling in place for how these characters would relate to each other, how they would talk. And like Nick said, we wanted it to sort of be grounded in a reality. We talked about it not being completely real, but we wanted it to be in a recognizable reality, especially for like people who grew up on Menominee Reservation. But we wanted it to be a bit heightened and a bit stylized in a way that would sort of fascinate readers as they went on.
So switching from analog to digital comic making. So I have an example of the from scratch and then reduce, reuse, recycle method, which is the sustainable play on terms. What we have here is actually page 16, which I believe is out in the Art Walk area if you want to check out the original version of it. It was penciled out traditionally, but then I redid it in Adobe Photoshop, taking reference to the thumbnails that Justin and I designed, which actually led to a really similar design layout. There's only a couple changes, as you can see, like, holding the tablet with the MTMS is very similar to the redo, just maybe a couple of things different. But there's also things that are very unique about them. I know Matthew, my younger brother, really likes the one panel. If you can see the mouse on there, this panel right here, where we have the crew back there as little stick figures, and that was partially done to comedic effect and easiness. So some of the designs rolled over, but when doing it in Photoshop, I utilized a method that I called action figures, which was inspired by current 2D animation show pipelines, and pretty much it made it a lot easier, and it was more sustainable for myself rather than having to redraw the characters all the time. I was able to pull it from that, and that we'll see on this slide if it loads.
I have a bit of experience with producing games. During college, I made multiple games throughout my whole, I'm going to say tenure, but I know that's the wrong term. Basically one per year. First two that I made were 2D platformers. And that was kind of what we wanted to go with for this game as well.
Mhm.
The original idea was to do like an endless runner game. You know, Subway Surfer you see on YouTube all the time. People put that underneath a bunch of other things just to keep your attention.
Mhm.
We wanted to do something like that, just not top down. We wanted to do side scrolling.
Mhm.
So yeah, you have examples like the original Mario game. That's a 2D platformer side scroller and everything. We have Sonic the Hedgehog, which was a bit more closer to the original idea as an endless runner. You know, Sonic goes fast and everything. But what we ended up was something closer to Donkey Kong Country, where it's a bit of a collectathon throughout the whole level.
Was recently shot the final episode for Reservation Dogs for season 3. Turns out it's the series finale, which I didn't know at the time. Was out there for about 2 weeks and actually spoke to Patrick while I was out there on the phone, talking a little bit with him and saying that it was like my first big in front of camera acting job. So it was really awesome to go out there and do that, and then realize that I was like, I'm wondering why Sterling cast me as this character. And then I found out he was going to end the series. And I don't want to give any spoilers out to you guys, but it just made sense, my character being in there and the series to end.